backstory in each case, which covers what I hope is an interesting look at one of the elements that made their lives so outstanding, or prompted them to take the first step that led along a path less travelled to a life so extraordinary and fascinating that it is certainly worth reading about. Part 1. All the World's a Stage. Let's start with accounts of the lives of 3 Australians who were, in their lifetimes, truly world famous. Although each became famous in a different field of endeavour, there is one thing that all their stories have in common. The memory of their achievements faded over time. 2 of them, who shared a commonality in that they were world-renowned in the general area of arts and entertainment, were subsequently lost and then rediscovered to a degree. It is true that Percy Grainger's place in the world of music was never really forgotten. There is a museum dedicated to his achievements and life, and his music has retained some degree of popularity with orchestras and military bands and in schools and colleges. Throughout the latter part of the 20th century, there was a small group of musicians who found his originality and the results of his quirky ability to mix folk and classical music genres pleasant to listen to and interesting to play. His life and achievements have been brought back to public awareness with a renewal of interest in his music in recent years. Annette Kellerman's achievements, for various reasons which I tried to explain in her story, were almost completely forgotten in the 1960s and 70s, in spite of the fact that she was actually living in Australia at the time. Toward the end of her life, there was some renewed interest in her achievements, and there have been several exhibitions of her memorabilia and archive material which have helped to keep her memory alive, and she has a community swimming pool named in her honour. In the case of George Morrison, the man whose role in world politics and Australian affairs was vitally important and influential during his lifetime, it seems that the world has moved on, and his memory has now almost faded from the Australian consciousness. The reason for this could be that whereas Percy Grainger and Annette Kellerman were famous in Europe and the United States, George Morrison's sphere of influence was Asia. Before his achievements became just a mostly forgotten part of history, he was universally known not as George Morrison, but as Chinese Morrison. Whether they are remembered or not, these 3 individuals lived truly remarkable lives and achieved things that were, in their time, extraordinary. Chapter 1. The Aussie Who Changed the World. Fighting the Righteous Fists. Australia's first military involvement in Asia occurred 120 years ago. The conflict was the Chinese Boxer Rebellion of 1899 to 1900. Chinese Christians and missionaries were slaughtered by members of a group called the Righteous Fists, whose members practiced martial arts and were therefore called boxers by the Europeans. Angered by exploitation and the arrogant attitude of international powers in China, the boxers attacked and murdered foreigners, missionaries, and Chinese Christians in an attempt to rid their country of their influence. The conflict culminated with all expatriate and diplomatic foreigners, along with many Chinese Christians, being blockaded in the walled enclave in Peking, Beijing, for 55 days. The Dowager Princess Zixi, a royal wife whose son had become emperor, broke with tradition when her son died and held on to power by installing her nephew as emperor. When the new emperor showed reformist tendencies, Zixi had his chief advisers beheaded and kept him a virtual prisoner, after most of his supporters fled into exile. She decided to use the Righteous Fists movement as an opportunity to rid China of foreign control by encouraging the rebellion and ordering the Chinese Imperial Army to support the Boxers. Although many generals hesitated to act on the command and resisted involving their troops,